All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are live. Welcome to Five Count. We have the North South Connection. I'm Jack Edwards,
I'm Big George.
and we have a very, very special guest today coming to us live from Collingwood, Ontario, Canada, by way of Pictou County, Nova Scotia. I believe I'm right. Is one of my good friends. He is Ben McCulley, better known as, or also known as, Asher Benjamin, Canada's greatest wrestling manager. Asher, how are you today?
Cannot complain with that introduction. I was waiting for a point to jump in and scold you and correct you and give you shit for a terrible introduction, but that was pretty decent. That's about a 7 out of 10.
Hey, I'll take it. Take what you can get today. That's what the goal is. But Ben, we're having you on because I know how big a wrestling fan you are, and we're talking managers, and you are in Rock Solid Wrestling manager extraordinaire, and you have and you've developed into that role. So, but first, we're going to do the jerk and the curtain section, and we'll kick it off. Is how'd you get not only involved in wrestling, but when did you start watching wrestling?
Can I ask a question first for George, who I just met? Pleasure to make your acquaintance, sir. I know
Always,
you know
always.
Collingwood because you're a friend of John's, but can you point out Nova Scotia on a map? Do you know where that is?
Um, I'm not gonna waste your time. No. Absolutely not.
It is the east
No.
coast of Canada. It's on the Atlantic Ocean. It's above Maine,
Okay.
north
Okay.
of Boston and New York. Just wanted to know because there's this stereotype about Canadians can't pick out American states on a map and vice versa. Americans can't pick out Canadian provinces. We're living the stereotype today. What
Hey,
was your
you know what's
question,
funny?
John?
That's funny you say that because I'm pretty sure a lot of people couldn't pick out a place in Texas because it's just that big. It's just that big. So
Yeah,
I get it.
I've been educating George on Canada as much as possible,
Well,
and
you're not doing a very good job.
no. Well, I mean, it's not like he has the atlas. It's not like I'm saying we're having a fucking test next week and get the atlas out, George. This ain't the SATs. It's but like it's funny because I meet a lot of folks. I have a lot of friends now from the U.S. and the knowledge of Canada is somewhat limited. But the more you'd be surprised. But yeah, like I knew nothing about Texas. Now I know a lot about Texas. Dallas is undefeated. There's a reason why the Von Erichs got into trouble in that city.
Dallas is undefeated. It'll never, it'll never take a loss, baby. Never take a loss.
So, Ben, when did you start watching wrestling, and how did you get into it?
You know, so many people in the wrestling business have the story, have the moment, have that cool little, oh, my grandfather, or we watched it together, whatever it was on Saturday mornings. But I don't have one of those stories. And this is a testament, I guess, to how long and how big of a wrestling fan I was my whole life. I don't remember. I've literally been watching wrestling for as long as I can remember. I have just always had wrestling on. So there's not a moment I could point to. In fact, it wasn't until like in recent years. So I'm 42 now. It was around the time I hit 40 and all the gears started turning in my head and I started figuring life out because you don't figure out life till 40. I realized that I owe my godfather, Jimmy Joe McDonald, I owe him for introducing me to wrestling because I've always had wrestling on, yet my parents don't like wrestling. So it took me until I was 40 until I put two and two together that the guy who I'd go and talk wrestling with when I was 7, 8 years old, oh, of course, he's the guy that introduced me to it when I was 3. So my godfather got me into it. I just don't have a memory of it because I've always watched it.
Did you start watching WWF or Atlantic Grand Prix?
WWF. I didn't. I saw clips of Grand Prix, and again, it was my young child mind that didn't really know what it was. I put two and two together later that because I saw Harley race on Grand Prix Wrestling, and he bloodied somebody up, and he got banned from Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling, and I just have this memory of it, but I didn't know what it was. it wasn't really until I started training and then I started learning the history of Grand Prix, and then I realized the connections between Grand Prix and Stampede Wrestling out in Calgary and how they'd always swap talent. Like that was a history lesson I learned later. I just saw clips on TV. I was a WWF guy through and through.
And Grand Prix, for those who don't know, because some folks watching this, was run by originally Emile Dupree, who was the father of Rene Dupree. Remember the so, and it only ran in the summertime because
Jack Edwards is on the cocaine again. I can see you.
Tell that story, please. Tell it from your mouth because it's way funnier when you tell it.
Well, when we first met, because I've been in radio 25 years, as long as I've been in wrestling, and I moved across the country for radio gigs that have always taken me out of wrestling, but it's always a steadier income. So I moved to Collingwood for the first time. First thing I do, find the local wrestling promoter. I get John Edwards' name. I want to go for coffee with him, so we meet at the Starbucks in Collingwood, and he comes in, and he's just at his nose the whole time. And first thing I noticed was, oh my God, this guy has Lewis Black's mannerisms. And I know Jack Edwards is a huge Lewis Black fan, and he kind of talks, and he has the kind of the mannerisms of Lewis Black. But one of the things he was doing was he's always doing this. So I come home, and my wife asks, hey, how'd the meeting go with the wrestling promoter? And I'm like, it was good. We had a great conversation. Guy was on coke the whole time. And my wife's like, oh, that's interesting. I'm like, yeah, first guy I meet in Collingwood, the guy's just railing on coke.
Oh, it's so much better.
And you didn't tell me that story till 3 years later?
No, I didn't have the heart to tell you that, yeah, one of your physical mannerisms and habits that you consistently have, you don't point out someone's nervous tics, but your fingers are always in the nose. You're always you're always up here. And I was like, I've been around the fresh powder. I've been around the ski resorts, so I know what the mannerisms of cocaine are, and I was sure you were on that ski trail.
Man.
But then, and I, for the record, I am not on cocaine. If I did cocaine, I would not be sitting here. I just scratch my nose a lot. So
you wouldn't be sitting here fat. I just know that. So
no,
going on.
Cocaine. Sorry, just one more point on it. Cocaine, and I think is the lesser of two evils to what I could have thought you were doing. Like, is he doing the same thing my 5-year-old kid does? Get out there,
Mm-hmm.
No, I went to cocaine.
I mean, he said you were an adult about it.
So Ben, when did you get into wrestling? You were 21 or?
Yeah, I was, to tell it succinctly, I was doing a high school internship at a TV station. So I was a reporter for a community access show, and wrestling came to my town. So Real Action Wrestling, RAW, came to Pictou County, Nova Scotia, and I was like, I'm going to do a story. And I was like, hey, it's my way in the door. Free ticket. I get to meet the people behind the scenes. I'm going to do a TV story. So I did a television story on them coming to town, and it aired, and they got a tape of it, and they called me right away. And there's a place, George, in the northern tip of Nova Scotia. It's called Cape Breton, and they talk different than even I do. It's very close to a Newfoundland accent. And the guy that ran the company was from Cape Breton, and he called me with this thick Cape Breton accent, French Cape Breton accent. He's like, "Oh, Ben Lyons, I love the TV story. You're a ring announcer now." So he was like, "You're going to be our ring announcer." So I was in college by the time this started. So I left high school, first year college, and then I'm skipping class to go on the road with them, and they're supposed to pay me, and I'm a poor college kid, so I was eating pizza crust off people's tables because I wouldn't eat anything. I wouldn't order anything. I'd wait for them to be done, and I'd eat the scraps. Kingman and Cowboy Mike Hughes on the East Coast know all about that, and they tell great stories. But I wasn't getting paid, and I finally got sick of it because I wanted to continue to be involved in wrestling. They had a training camp coming up run by the Cardinal Sinners, who's Bobby Roode, Brody Steele, Kingman, and Cowboy Mike Hughes. And I said to the owner of the promotion, you haven't paid me like you were supposed to, and I'm ring announcing for you, and this sucks. But instead, why don't you train me? Why don't you let me do that training camp for free? Because it costs like $3,000, $4,000 to get trained to be a pro wrestler.
Right.
And they went, phew, now we officially don't have to pay this kid, and he's not going to last a week. He won't last a week. And I went in with like 10 or 11 trainees, and only 2 of us lasted all the way to the end and became full-time wrestlers out of it. So I lucked into it in a way, like just happenstance in the universe.
Yeah, no, definitely. I can definitely see how you can kind of say you just walked into that. As kind of saying like you kind of walked into it, would you say the experience was more rewarding as far as just kind of getting the training, or would you say you would have had, took the money back in the day if you would have kind of redo it?
Oh my God, if they had paid me and then I didn't kick up a stink, who knows what would have happened, right?
Mm.
I'm so happy that it worked out this way. A lot of the fellow trainees hated me because word got out that I was doing it for free. They all scrimped and saved and stole money from their parents and were paying for it. And I was the privileged kid in their eyes that was doing it for free. So they hated me. And then they hated
Wow.
me even more when I was good at it, when I was better than them at it. So I was a heel right from the get-go.
Oh, so it works. It works. Can't sell that gimmick.
And what was your first gimmick? Tell us the story, because I think George will like your first gimmick.
Well, back to the whole eating pizza crust thing. While we were training, and I'm now like a second, third year university student, and I'm giving up my weekends to go train. I don't have any money. And so, again, we'd go out to eat in between classes. And Cowboy Mike Hughes, Kingman, and Bobby Roode would buy all this food and then leave the scraps. And so they knew that they could, like, get me to do shit for food. And so there was one night we watched a WWF pay-per-view at a bar, and they fed me
There it is.
beer. And then
There it is.
afterwards, yeah, bar car. It wasn't very
Yeah.
far. So we went to a pizza place after, and they knew they could get the poor guy to do whatever. They were like, hey, Ben, we'll buy you pizza if you jump up on this table and dance for everybody in the pizza place. And I didn't even give it a second thought. I was like, okay, jump up on the table. I bust a move, and I jump off the table, and I do the splits on the dance floor. I get a full standing ovation from everybody in the busy pizza place. And Mike Hughes says to me, we weren't even going to buy you pizza. We were fucking with you. But that was unbelievable. They bought me 2 slices. Next day, we're back at training, and I walk in the warehouse with the ring set up, and Mike Hughes has got a pad and a pencil, and he's like, there he is, Vinny Barbarino, our disco dancing gimmick. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure that name's copyrighted, so I can't be Vinny Barbarino. But we brainstormed Vinny Glide, and I became the new generation Disco Inferno. The ladies love Vinny Glide, dancing up and down the roads in the Maritimes.
So I'm a WCW guy, so Disco Inferno very, very much resonates with me. So I love that actually. I think that, was a good gimmick to kind of start with. I mean, gladly, if you kind of changed it up from then, you could probably switch it back one day. Doubt it, but at the same time, it was probably fun when you was doing it.
Yeah, and they were very adamant. We were old school. We were the last generation that toured 6 nights a week. So I wrestled full time. That was my job for an extended period of time, and that just doesn't happen anymore. But we toured, and my trainers were old school, and they were very adamant about living the gimmick. So I tried to grow a mullet, and I'd wear my shiny shirts out to the bar, and I would be a complete asshole to women. And that's not really me. I'm not that guy. But I would dance and just go up to strangers. I'd go up to strangers, and I would just start grinding on them and like, how you doing? How you doing? Hey, Kim, who just signed in and said, what's up? How you doing? And I would just
give
I'd live the gimmick.
So Ben's like Ben said, he was a radio announcer, and he came here because the deal is, if he's like, well, if he exchanged kind of free radio promo to get on the show, right? And from what he tells me, it worked everywhere except one place, right? And I remember I met Ben, and I didn't know much about him, and I was actually like, I don't want to hang out with him because he's like, oh, I said, come with us to the show. We had a couple shows that weekend with Hacksaw Jim Duggan on it. Come with us to the show. You can meet all the guys. I told Mark's like, talk to this guy, see what you can do, blah, blah, blah. I said, Mark, Tornado is the promoter, the owner of Rock Solid Wrestling, a really great guy. We'll have him on the show. But I was like, I remember saying to Aaron, I'm not going to tell this guy anything. I don't want him to come on the weekend. Then Ben came, and I found out, okay, he's a great guy, and I'm not on cocaine, so it worked out for everybody. But the day, once, like, he had to go back to the bottom. Just, you explain that, Ben, because, like, but I remember the day I talked to you, and we had the conversation. I called Tornado and said, if this guy can bump, he's a manager. He's our Bobby Heenan. And he's like, why? I said, because he can fucking talk. Because, I mean, I tell George all the time, and when you look at talent, if somebody isn't engaging in a regular conversation, like, you can tell instantly if somebody's engaging. Like, and I'm like, well, he's a radio announcer, so of course he can talk. That's what he does for a living. That's his job. So, but tell the story of how you kind of had to go back to square one out here.
Well, I worked in radio and wrestling in Ottawa, and when I called the wrestling promoter then once upon a time, it was, you're on the radio? Great. And put me on the show. And I would talk about it on the radio, and I was in the semi-main event as myself, the radio guy, and I'm wrestling Brutus the Barber Beefcake. I'm wrestling the Honky Tonk Man. He's putting the radio guy in the ring with all the veterans just to get all the radio play, to get all the free promotion. So I thought, this is how it works everywhere. So I just was assuming, same thing. I'm going to promote the show. I'm going to plug it, push it on my radio show, and I'll be a part of the show. And I get basically a thanks, no thanks. We're good, kid, because it's such a tightly knit, old school group of guys that run Rock Solid Wrestling. So I had to go back to setting up the ring, which, that's what I did 15 years ago, like paying your dues. But I had to set the ring up.
Come on, Kareem. You know that's not true.
It's definitely, I would lean into it, Jack, because it's better than the alternative of getting your extra protein. But anyway, yeah, I had to set the ring up. I had to set up chairs. I ref and ring announced again. Like, that's how I got in the business 15 years ago. Was you put the hanky down? Like, what are you, Amber Heard on trial, sneaking your shorts from a tissue?
Listen, fellas, I got it. So, anyway, continue. Shut up.
So, anyway, I remember I refereed a match with Hacksaw Jim Duggan in it, and Tornado was like, that was a damn good refereeing. You kind of do know your stuff. And then I did an announcement in Collingwood, and I remember Tyler Turbo bumped me, and I remember Cody Deaner being like, going over the match and being like, do you know what you're doing? Do you know what you're doing, kid? And I'm like, yeah, I wrestled like 300 times before this. Just no one knew who I was. And so, rightfully so, they weren't just going to throw me into a high-profile spot for the publicity. I had to earn my keep. So I paid my dues all over again, and then earned everyone's trust, and here we are. In the main event, wrestling for the title at the biggest show of the year. You working your way up the ladder.
Yeah, by then they was like, you know what? He's got something. Like, really? Now? So, okay.
Yeah, well, and then it was, I am proud to say, the gimmick was me. Like, that was, I was the one who initially, because I was like, we got to give him a gimmick. Can't just be Ben McCulley. I mean, like, and then I'm like, I was like, you're going to be a hipster. Like, because Tornado and I have been talking about how much he hates hipsters. I'm like, you're going to be a hipster. And then that's the snap thing, because that's like a poetry slam thing, right?
Yeah, beatnik, very beatnik. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, and it works, man. It works. Like, to see, a few years ago, was it the Ken Shamrock show where he got, Ben's there to get his ass kicked by the Stars. Ben took a DDT from Ricky Steamboat, took a chair shot from Demolition, took a belly-to-belly from Ken Shamrock. Like, who else? Didn't Tito punch you too?
Oh, yeah, Tito clotheslined me over the top rope. $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase put me to sleep in the $1 Million Dream. I have lived all my fantasies out getting my ass kicked. I didn't fantasize about getting my ass kicked. It's just I fantasize about working with these guys, and it comes with getting your ass kicked. Not to mention little old ladies in the front row, like you want to talk about this character resonating in like something out of the 80s. We were in Timmins, and a little old lady came over the guardrail and just started wailing on me in the back of my head.
That's
Because
insane.
my riles were up so much.
The full pop cans, like the full cans of pop cans they're
Oh my
throwing.
God.
Yeah,
Now,
it's
Ben,
like,
do you have a favorite wrestler to work with? Like, out of all the wrestlers that you work with, do you have like a favorite?
Oh, I've got a nostalgic connection to the Honky Tonk Man because I did a bunch of stuff with him. We teamed together on the East Coast when I was Vinny Glide, and then I reconnected with him when I was in Ottawa. We did a bunch of stuff, so I always cherish those memories. He was the first name that trusted me, and like I just felt like a part of the match with. But nothing beats getting a DDT from Ricky the Dragon Steamboat.
Nah,
That was the best 3 seconds of my entire career was when Steamboat locked me up and dropped me on my head.
that was a really, you were on that road, you were on that drive too, and Ricky's flight got messed up. He got there, he was pissed, rightly so. He went to the bathroom, and he was like, "Fellas, I'm a little bit cranky." And the first thing he says to me, he's like, "How long you been promoting for?" I'm like, "I don't know, 10, 12 years, whatever it was." "Your wife like it?" I'm like, "No, she hates it." He's like, "No surprise." Once we get into the car, it's like, "Let me tell you about WrestleMania 3." And we're like, "Okay." And
you ain't
like,
meant to ask.
so, but you and Cody Deaner work well together.
I like to think, and yeah, he's like the best work of my career, if I say, because like I'll be forever attached to the Vinny Glide character, and I've gotten some big reactions, but the best work I've ever done has been across the ring from Cody Deaner. I like to think that 5 straight years of Cody Deaner versus Asher Benjamin, where I was like a new age Bobby Heenan, where I was managing a rotating family of guys to try to take the title off him. I think it was Rock Solid Wrestling's version of Hulk Hogan versus the Heenan family. It was a 5-year period of all the big shows. I'm there trying to take the title off him. We do promos back and forth, and I end up getting my neck broken every night, taking a DDT. And it was some of the most fulfilling and some of the best work of my career. And Cody's a super pro. He is of that Hulk Hogan babyface level on the independent scene in Ontario. And so that was definitely some of the best work.
Yeah. Cody's a pro's pro. Like, great guy, like really, really good guy, and a fantastic wrestler. Like, really gets it, really understands it, and especially on the independent level, which is obviously different because it's harder. Like, and that's the one thing I say to people. Our guys go out, and I treat as a promoter every show that nobody knows who we are. Because we don't have TV, really, that's any consistent. We don't really have like a multi-million-dollar budget and social media budget. So we just kind of, every time we go to a town, we have to reintroduce ourselves. Now, that being said, a lot of people know who we are, but in Collingwood, it may not be the same people every year. And so Ben will pretty much have to go out and have to start from scratch and get him. And it's easy. Like, it's that whole thing, like, keep it simple. And Cody does that. Like, Cody's so good. Like, at just keeping things simple and, having a style and cutting promos that people want to cheer for you. So that stuff you guys did is great. And you do great stuff with Scotty, because Scotty's a bull. He's just so strong. And George, as I've said to you, Scotty's basically Sting. He looks kind of like Sting, and but a great guy. And really,
I think Scotty the Body is stronger than Sting. I think he is pound for pound can do more things in the ring than Sting could from a strength standpoint. I'm not taking anything away from Sting, obviously.
Right.
Sorry, WCW guy. But Scotty the Body, he, like, without hesitation, can lift my fat ass up. And, like, I fluctuate in weight like the wind blows. And I can be in great shape in a rock solid ring. And then sometimes things aren't going well, and I'm not in such great shape. And Scotty the Body has picked me up when I've been not in great shape. And I'm like a little low center of gravity bowling ball of gravity that not many people can pick up and hold up and then go one-armed and get the crowd and then drop. And he does it without hesitation.
He's a hoss.
Yeah, he
Absolutely
lives.
a hoss.
Yeah, he lives for real. Because a lot of people can't even get people up in the suplex, let alone hold them up long enough to actually get the crowd involved. So that's actually like that takes some skill, people. That takes some serious skill.
I get winded picking up my son and holding him up.
So, gentlemen, today we're talking managers. Obviously, Ash is here. So, what characteristics make a good manager? Ben, we'll start with you. What are some things that someone who's going to make this list? What are some of the things you have to have?
Well, this pulls the curtain back a bit, I think, and it's something that a fan might not wrap their head around or understand, and it's something that I have struggled with, but I think it's more accurate to say I've focused on and I've tried to do to the best of my ability because I've been so cognizant of it. Quick side stories. When I was Vinny Glide and I wrestled in a lumberjack match where the main event was Bobby Roode versus the Cowboy Mike Hughes, I had 4 matches under my belt. And in the lumberjack melee, I came face to face with the guy that I wrestled with earlier. And I thought the right thing to do was throw hands with him. Well, we started throwing hands as the main event was going into the finish. And I ended up getting a very stern physical discipline from Brody Steele Kingman about taking heat away from the main event. And it was a very important and very painful lesson I learned. And that carries over to a manager.
Brody Steele's 6'8", 320, by the way.
Yeah, look up Brody Steele.
6'8", yeah, he's huge. He's ridiculously big. Sorry, Ben.
The number one thing that makes a great manager great is when they can do their thing and they don't steal heat. When they don't steal the attention, they're able to get heat. They're able to get people booing, get people riled up, and you take that and you put it on your guy. Whether it's a crafted promo, whether it's body language, you have to be able to get energy and then put it on your guy, not take it all yourself. Don't steal attention. Don't be on the outside of the ring, having everyone focused on you. You need to be good at like diverting to your guy and getting everyone to hate your guy. Because, I mean, it's old school. Managers used to be the mouthpiece for awesome wrestlers that couldn't talk. And so if you talk for them, you need to get people to hate them for them. And that is the number one skill that a good manager has.
George, what do you think? What makes a good manager for you?
I love a manager that has a good sense of comic relief as well. I mean, a lot of times you do have people who can focus on themselves a lot, like you were saying, Ben. There's a lot of managers who have that particular quality and then don't know that they have it, to where they're kind of taking the light from their talent. And I think that's something that kind of gets lost in the business a lot, as far as what makes a good manager and what doesn't. And I want somebody who can actually be funny a little bit, just a little. You ain't got to be. I ain't asking for Richard Pryor to come out the back. But at the same time, I definitely want somebody to give me a little bit of something that they can actually say, all right, that was funny from him. Let me keep paying attention to him just a little bit. I know he's funny every now and again when he comes out. So that kind of keeps the attention on this type of person. So I like that. Give me that comic relief. Give me a little bit of funny. Give me something to keep, watching you for. Because, of course, the seriousness of a manager always kind of comes across. It's always going to come across. But you definitely want to have something else to look at him for, too. So, for me, a little bit of comic relief.
For me, as a manager, you got to be able to obviously talk. Talking to me, like you got to talk, and you got to be able to bump. For me, though, when I look at great managers, I look at the guys who could talk and bump, because the bumps are so key. Because, like you said, George, the comic relief. Well, there's so many times it's when the manager takes the bump. That's the comic relief. Or it's like when it's time to get the manager to get his comeuppance, because they always build to the manager. Like, to be able to take those bumps kind of more, I think that's what's important. Bump, like when I think of a manager, I think the bump and talk. But so, gentlemen, we're going to start this how the rules go with this thing. Ben, you're our guest. As our guest, you get the first 2 selections. George and I will each pick one, and then we debate on the third. We have the ability to veto. So if you don't like something, if you think it's just preposterous, or maybe it doesn't, you don't think it belongs in the top 5, you can veto it. Then the person has to come up with another thing. So we're going to kick it off.
For example, just let me wrap my head around this. If George was to come at me with the greatest manager of all time was Harvey Whippleman, I can just be like, veto. Like, come on, what are you talking about?
As the fifth, for the 5th option, because the first 4 are automatically on the list. No matter, and generally we're pretty good. You know, we keep them.
We're not giving out nobody who. We're not coming out here with, Armando Estrada. We're not coming out here with that. But we know for a fact that there's some good managers out here that deserve to be talked about, that don't get talked about enough, that we can kind of put a little bit of light on, as well as some of the big guys who actually do a lot of good work too. I mean, they did the work to be in the spot that they're in. Now they deserve to be ranked.
So Ben, first 2 picks, who is it?
Well, I bet you both of you could and would. You absolutely would bet your life savings and put your houses up and put it all on betting who I'm going to choose as number 1. Like, it's the only answer, because there's only one right answer. It's who Ashton Benjamin is modeled after as a new age version of. It is Bobby the Brain.
Bobby Heenan.
Okay.
What made and then who's number 2?
So I don't go on a 10-minute rant and diatribe about Bobby Heenan. We just go to number 2. Okay.
No. We'll get to the diatribe in a second. Don't worry. Let's get
number 2. Number 2 for me is somebody that, like Bobby Heenan, is like on the list of best workers. Period. Like, take the manager title away, they're just one of the best workers. Period. The best parts of the show, best overall characters, and that's Sensational Sherri. Sherri was a wonderful worker, but somehow a better manager.
Yeah, she was like. So we'll talk about Sherri first, because you know me, I'm one of the biggest Sherri marks in the world, and I love that pick because every guy she managed, she only managed main event talent. That's number 1. Like, she didn't manage, like, you look at the guys she managed, everyone she elevated, and that ability to shift that heat, like, she got amazing heat, and that ability to shift and the ability to talk and bump. Yeah, she had it all. Absolutely. Sherri, 100%. She's on my top 5 for sure. George, what do you think about Sherri?
The thing about Sherri is I feel like she's worked with so many people on so many levels. I even seen Sherri in my WCW days. The thing is about, Sherri for me was Sherri would get out there and do it all in one night and come back and do it all next week. And it was like every week she was giving you great time on the mic. And the thing was, she never had to get on the mic and actually say things sometimes to even be an impactful manager at times. Sometimes she would just sit back in the cut and just not say anything. And then she'll come in and, she'll spice it up a little bit. But at the same time, that kind of makes a great manager too. Like you said, she needs to be able to kind of put the heat on her talent. And she did that very, very well. So I love the pick of Sherri. It kind of just embodies exactly what you said you wanted as a manager and kind of everything that everybody else talked about too. So I agree.
She had the ability to cheating and being sneaky. She would distract you from the fact that she was an 11 out of 10 gorgeous woman and absolutely stunning. And yet you still hated her because of her behavior. Look at who she managed. Like you mentioned, WCW. So you got Harlem Heat. You got Booker T. And then in WWF, most famously, Queen Sherri with Macho Man Randy Savage. These are 2 guys that don't need a mouthpiece. These are 2 guys that don't need someone to talk for them. They can talk, and they talk well. And yet she still elevated them. She still made them better. That's a testament to a hell of them.
She was one of those, like I say, she did a little bit of everything. Like sometimes I would see Sherri, like when she got into the ring with the conniving way she would be. Like she was really, really sneaky. Like it was like, hey, I'm about to slide this in the ring, or I'm about to go ahead and pull your leg from here, or the ref don't see me doing this. Like she had it all, and it's like a lot of people actually mimicked her. You can see
Yeah.
it throughout history where they take little bits of what Sherry actually did and try to create themselves as a manager, try to build off their own version of that. So, yeah, no, Sherry's a great pick. I'm not, look, never going to discount a Sherry pick in this list.
Yeah.
Never going to discount it.
And now we got to get to, like you said, he's this. Listen, I know we're going to debate the order and lists in which this list went, but a few weeks ago we talked about black wrestlers from the 80s and 90s, and I said there's only going to be one name at the top, and it was and that's this with Bobby Heenan. Ben, what made, like you mentioned, I don't really like this word, but he may have been one of the best performers in wrestling. Like I think that because he was as good a wrestler as anybody he managed, maybe other than Henning and Bockwinkel and Stevens. He was as good as anybody. Like he could put him in there and he could bump, and he, like the weasel suit stuff, like Jesus. Like, and the ability to make you laugh 1 second and you want to kill him the next. Like, so Ben, talk about Bobby.
Well, Bobby, he's one of the only people that is on two GOAT lists, and that is of managers and commentators, because he was that damn good at having the gift of gab. He could talk so well. But he was an excellent in-ring talent. Like, he wrestled a lot, and he did what, you see Asher Benjamin do with Rock Solid Wrestling a lot, which is those what's the word? Like a highlight, like a special attraction. That special attraction match where, we've seen Jimmy Hart, and we've seen many of the wrestlers once or twice in their career get roped into that. Oh, he's gonna that pay to see him get his ass kicked. But Heenan did that on the regular. He was bumping every night. He did 6 nights a week on the road, teaming with one of his guys, and so you get that handicap thing with the 6-man. He did a lot with the head shrinkers as the 6-man of the Samoans, whatever their name was back in
the Islanders.
The Islanders. Thank you. So he was putting the tights on more often than not, and I love that he, even when he wasn't wrestling, sometimes he'd come out with the jacket and the tights and have that look, and I've stolen that from Bobby Heenan, and I kind of love doing that thing. So he was a worker. He was all around well-rounded, one of the best at kind of everything. So there's nobody that can hold a candle to him.
And Bobby, I think, because George, you know this, how important I think draw is in the wrestling business. Like, I think you're measured by what you do, and Bobby the Brain Heenan is the biggest draw of any manager ever. Like, how he helped WrestleMania 3, I don't think gets mentioned enough. Like, Andre could talk. Like, Andre could talk for what Andre was. But just Heenan's presence, that's the ability to shift the heat. He didn't have to say a word. Just Heenan being there, people knew Andre's an asshole. Like, I hope Hall kills him. And I think that speaks to volumes of Bobby Heenan and what he did. He could just his presence elevated people. And then he opened his mouth and you're like, oh, this guy's the best. So,
one of the most iconic lines that prove what you just said as true is Andre the Giant turned heel by not doing anything. He didn't say anything. He didn't do any action that turned him heel. He just walked out on the Piper's Pit with Bobby Heenan. And Hulk Hogan famously uttered the line, "What are you doing with him?"
Easily.
That tells you everything you need to know. Bobby Heenan was so good that John left camera to go snort another line just to come back and have the energy to talk about it.
Let me talk about Bobby.
He's got a fresh tissue and a whole other cut up line ready to go.
I got some Gentleman Jack, courtesy of our good friend Fedorowski, who brought it for my birthday yesterday.
Happy
George,
birthday once again.
Thank you very much. George, Bobby Heenan.
So I got most of Bobby Heenan as a announcer. And announcer Bobby Heenan was on for an hour in WCW, which was necessary because that was the only good hour of announcing that we got at that junction at that time. But Bobby Heenan was really, really good at making it not necessarily about him, but how he could literally take his own persona and just put it on somebody else. It didn't matter who it was. It didn't matter if there was a heel or not. If Bobby talked about you, you were not liked because you're hanging with Bobby. Bobby knows you a little bit too well. So a lot of it was literally him kind of making people who came out of that curtain. Sometimes you would see Eddie Guerrero and he would be the cool color commentator right then and there, just giving Eddie Guerrero just heat. And then, of course, you got Chavo coming with him, so he was going to give you a line about him and Chavo being together in some Mexican way. It was just how Bobby actually operated, and he put the heat on, whoever he wanted to put it on. And it was so good because it was like no matter who came out the curtain, you knew a little bit more about them, and they were a little bit more colorful because Bobby was talking about it. It was a lot more entertaining because Bobby was talking about it. You can tell when he got off the stage that it was time for the talent to kind of take over a little bit because the announcing didn't kind of come as well as it did. And you can kind of see that a little bit. If you kind of watch it over time, if you look at it and see that hour with Bobby Heenan was better announcing, and the hour without him was better talent in the ring. Or you had Hulk Hogan, or you had Sting, or you had Luger, you had some of the high flyer names who didn't need that help to kind of push them. So you can see a lot about Bobby in the early days of him just being an announcer and him coming out and just being himself. It was cool. I loved it.
A great announcer is going to give flavor to a match. That's in general. A great announcer gives flavor. Bobby Heenan gave the best flavor that your tongue craved ever after. And another great example of that is the barbershop window moment as iconic without Marty Jannetty going through the glass and Bobby Heenan said, I knew he was going to do that after babying it up minutes before.
Exactly. I knew he was going to do that. I knew
my favorite Bobby Heenan line ever was from the Royal Rumble '92, which I still believe to this day is the greatest single broadcasting performance in wrestling history. Gorilla and Bobby on that night were as good as anyone's ever been. You take JR and them, no. Gorilla and Bobby were as good that night because Bobby was on. Bobby was just. But my favorite line it was the Bushwhackers versus the Beverly Brothers, and they had Jameson with them. And Jameson was this weird nerdy guy, and they panned down to Jameson's shoe, and he's got like hockey tape wrapped around his shoe, and Gorilla, of course, he's like, well, if you don't have the money, you do what you have to do. And Bobby's like, why doesn't he have the money? It's like if he had gone to school and got an education, he'd have a decent job. Instead, he wants to leech off the government my good tax dollars. I paid almost $200 last year. And Gorilla's like, will you stop? And every time he says I paid $200, but like even in the Rumble, when he's like, it's a kilt, Roddy. It's not a skirt. And then he starts hitting Flair. Oh, you skirt wearing freak. Like he was just a genius. Like he was just so good. So George, next, who's our third pick on the list here?
I want to go controversial. I'm always wanted to be the Spitfire. I'm always going to be that guy. We talked about this, and he's going to rank on this list, whether you like it or not. And that's Paul Heyman.
Oh yeah,
Paul
I knew he'd be on the list.
Deserves to be on this list because you know why he deserves to be on this list. He's one of everybody he's managed. Look, kind of like what you were saying, Ben, about Andre the Giant when he turned heel. He didn't have to say anything to turn heel. We knew Brock Lesnar was going to be the best thing walking at the time because he had a great manager and he didn't have to say a word. Everybody hated him regardless of what he did, all because of Paul Heyman. You had CM Punk. You had him come in. Everybody was like, look, he's just going to be whatever he's going to be. But Paul Heyman pushed him so hard and made him look so good for so long that people are screaming CM Punk's name now because of he did back in the day. And that's all because of, Paul Heyman and me. Every Paul Heyman guy, the tribal chief, the current, big name that everybody loves, Paul Heyman. I'm not gonna say that Roman Reigns couldn't talk, but there was a time in his life where he wasn't as good as he is now. And then Paul Heyman kind of helped him segue to where he is now. So I think, Paul Heyman deserves some burn on this list.
Absolutely.
And that's
I
just
would
WWE history.
Yeah, he's a great talker. He's one of the like you talk about talking. He could talk. So
I think that your pick is less controversial than you think it is. I think a lot of people would put him in a top 5 list.
I know
But to play
somebody who
devil's
wouldn't.
advocate,
because Bobby Heenan lived in our life, Kareem. That's why.
yes, exactly. It's and like the rules that John had spoke about like taking the bump. Like, hey, Heyman never really took a bump. He can't.
No.
He doesn't bump very well. And my devil's advocate argument about Paul Heyman is, I mean, he can sell a match, he can sell tickets. He's a promoter. His promos can do that. I think he's one of the top promos of all time.
Yeah,
But does that automatically make him a great manager? I would say hypothetically, like, he's a great manager because he's such a good promo. But if Stone Cold Steve Austin came back as a manager tomorrow and talked the way he did, the electrifying way he did, the attention getting, the crowd popping way he did, and he managed somebody, would you consider Stone Cold Steve Austin one of the best managers of all time because he's so damn good at talking and that's kind of the talent? That's my devil's advocate about Paul Heyman. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve to be on the list, but I knew he was going to come up, and I wanted to come up with some kind of devil's advocate, and that's it.
And we have to rank these guys, so there's going to be some conversations, I think, when we rank them. I'm saving mine for when we rank them.
I'm gonna save it. Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna save it because I have a rebuttal to everything. I have to.
Okay.
This is why I'm here. All right. So, John, you have to contribute to this list.
If you don't know who I'm going to mention, you don't know me well at all.
Go ahead and say his name. Go ahead and put him
Jim
out there.
Cornette.
Exactly.
Jim Cornette belongs on this list, and he belongs very high on it. For me, talking and bumping, next to Bobby, I don't think there's better. Jim fell off the fucking scaffold, for God's sakes. And Jim Cornette
didn't bump. He broke his legs.
But he took the bump, right? Like, he did great stuff. Like, he would always be like in the ring. He'd do his referee boxing, and then he'd take the bump from Bobby and Stan. Always be big. He and Paul Heyman actually had a very entertaining match at Great American Bash, 1989. Which Bob Caudle famously said, "All right, let's start getting some clothes off here," because it was like a tuxedo match. But it was actually, it was all right. It was entertaining. The crowd was into it. But Jim Cornette, to me, you mentioned one of the great talkers in wrestling history. He's it for sure. Like, he was so good. And, as the talker, and then, like you said, had that ability to sell. And he didn't manage a lot of guys. I think for Cornette, it was quality over quantity. Like, what he did for the Midnight Express is what makes him high on this list. Because Bobby wasn't a talker and Dennis wasn't a talker. They could work their ass off. And you give him Cornette, and I have Cornette's scrapbook, and he posts his hate mail that he got. Like, somebody just putting this and outlining their middle finger and sending it to him. Like, he had heat. He was a heat seeker. And yeah, there isn't a manager's list of all time if Jim Cornette isn't on it. So now, here's where the fun begins. So Ben, you're first. Who is your pick for the fifth man on this list, or the fifth woman, or fifth person?
See, I didn't think that far ahead because I knew I was bringing two to the table, and then I got riled up arguing about Paul Heyman, and I left Cornette for you. I was a WWF watcher my whole life. I didn't have access to the NWA, and so that's I out of that bias and that nostalgia, that's why I went with Sherry. I know Cornette's the number 2 guy, but I wanted you to have him. So I had all these thoughts in my head, and I don't know if I really, because that fifth person, man.
I got one.
I think everybody has one, but the funny thing is, I don't think everybody's gonna have one that matches. That's
it's
one that matches.
So Ben, you got one? George, you want to go first? Throw one on the table.
Let me marinate on it.
Okay. I got one. I got one right off the hop. If you want me to throw it out,
Sure. I want you to throw it out.
Paul Bearer.
Yeah. Ironically, I agree. That's who I would put out there. It's between for me. It's between him and Jimmy Hart. And the reason why I put Jimmy Hart up there is because of course he worked with Hulk Hogan. I mean I almost figured that you would put that up there.
Okay, so I was with you. I was like, I'm on Team George here, until you just said that about Hulk Hogan. And I know you're a WCW guy, but Jimmy Hart with Hogan, I think for the majority of the run was like babyface. His ability to get heat and want me as a fan to want him to get hurt was top notch, and I think what puts him up here. So, Paul Bearer was was a fantastic character. He complemented the Undertaker wonderfully. He was the side to that protein and made the dinner, and with like that was legendary. But that just is part of that act. I don't know if that qualifies for one of the best managers of all time.
I think,
and I know Percy Pringle. I know Percy had a career beforehand.
And I know we're talking Paul Bearer.
So if you're talking Paul Bearer, you're making my point for me. I don't know if just being with Undertaker and then with Kane and whatever.
I think it does.
Think it puts him top 5
because of who the Undertaker was, and where the Undertaker got to. The Undertaker, I don't think, gets to where he gets to as quickly as he does without Paul Bearer. I think
Paul Bearer did work with Kane, which was a part of the Undertaker gimmick, which kind of helped both of those superstars. He kind of look at it.
He helped get Undertaker and Kane over. I mean, two of the biggest stars of the Attitude Era, two big money guys. I mean, again, quality over quantity. He was with Mick Foley too. He had Vader for a bit. Like, he had a lot of guys he managed. He was always in the main event level spot. Again, the bumps. Jimmy's a better bumper.
Yeah. Jimmy's a way better bumper.
And way better at getting heat. Way better at making people hate him.
Mm-hmm. The Mouth of the South was out there. Yeah. Teddy
Long's not a bad idea.
Teddy Long is a bad idea on this list because the list is already packed. That's the only reason. That's the only reason I didn't bring Teddy Long to the table is because I know Teddy Long is like 7, 8.
Yeah, there's some great managers.
It's a lot of great managers, and
if you're in the top 10, you're a legend. And unfortunately, this podcast is not determining the top 10; it's determining the top 5. And my vote is for Jimmy Hart over Paul Bearer.
Jimmy Hart. Okay, we have 3 out of 2. George, so I'll vote for Paul Bearer because I put him on the list. So George, you're the decider.
You know, it's funny. I told you I was going to bring controversy to the table. I knew I was going to. Right on time, baby. But anyway, I'm going to say Paul Bearer because the simple fact of quantity over quality. Yes, Jimmy can take bump. Yes, Jimmy can take bump. But at the same time, Paul Bearer sold them to like. If you had to flip the roles of Paul Bearer and Jimmy Hart, do you think they could actually switch? I think Paul Bearer could. I don't think Jimmy Hart could do that for the Undertaker.
Here's the thing: the Undertaker was so unique to me that it separate he's one of those guys. Jimmy Hart was a really good manager who managed a lot of
different types of talent. Yeah,
different talent, but he was never in the main events like Paul Bearer was. You know what I mean?
Right.
Except when he got with Hogan, but he was tag team guy, intercontinental guy, very, very good, very obnoxious, good bumper, good talker. But for me, I think Paul Bearer's impact with Kane and the Undertaker and Mankind, that whole thing, to me, I think that puts him on the list. And so we're democratic here. Sorry, Ben. I know you're upset. But before we look at this top 5, you mentioned Harvey Whippleman. He's another manager. He's not going to make the top 5, obviously. Slick. I always like Slick.
Slick with that big ass suit? Hell no. Fuck that.
I don't think Slick deserves to be near the top 5, but I
No, this isn't top 5. This
I
is
know, but
honorable
I'm just
mention
saying.
type guy.
This is one
I
of the
have
honorable mentions.
I have a soft spot for looking into the camera and saying, "Turn out the lights, the party's over" every time.
That's
So-
hilarious. That's hilarious. My honorable mention would be Brother
Yeah.
Love. My honorable mention would be Brother Love. He was good as far as talking. He can get the attention on himself, but as far as being a good manager to kind of promote folks, it just kind of seemed like he wasn't the best at it, but he was good. Like I say, being able to kind of get the attention on himself.
He's the original manager of the Undertaker.
He was,
Yep.
but he did pass that off to a better manager, in
Right.
Paul Bearer.
Right.
Brother Bearer.
Johnny Valiant sucked. He was horrible. Like, he was an okay bumper because he was a good wrestler, but he didn't watch any promo. He makes zero sense at all. Just zero sense. He sucked. So I want to make sure it's known that he didn't like Johnny Valiant. So we got 5 people on the list so far. Bobby Heenan, Sensational Sherry, Paul Heyman, Jim Cornette, and Paul Bearer. So what order are these going? I'm assuming we're pretty unanimous that Bobby Heenan's number 1.
I can go ahead and take a stab at this and kind of put it all together for us, but that's just
All right,
me.
George. All right, what are we doing here?
So I would say we got Bobby Heenan 1, Jim Cornette 2, Sherry 3, Heyman 4, and Bearer 5.
I agree with that 5. That's my 5 too.
Because it kind of has to go that way.
I would argue for, like, we're going to get raked.
I see. Hold on, I never did it, and I can't do it. Too black. Anyway,
what are you doing?
I'm trying to. Hey, look at that! I'm doing. If I do NWO, will like it go black and white? Like, what's gonna? You're seeing the thumbs. Like, I'm not tripping on acid, right? You're seeing when I do a thumbs up, a little thumb appears.
We got a man
that,
on acid. We got a man on coke, and I'm out of here because I'm too dark for this. So,
it is my daughter's bedtime, and I am the second greatest father of Rock Solid Wrestling, so I should bid you adieu as well.
Thank you very much, Ben.
This is the list, Ben. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. George and I will continue for a bit. Hey, there it is. But thank you for your time.
Does it do this? No? I'll just imagine there's one here.
All right, have a good one.
Peace.
Yeah. So that's the list, George. I mean, Heyman. I'm fine with it. Listen, I'm the biggest Sherry mark in the world. So, like, any further up to Sherry, like, I agree with the list. I just know we're going to get nailed because of Paul Heyman. Kareem likes it, though. Kareem likes the 5.
So the reason, folks, if you want to go
ahead
and go into the list as far as how we did it, I'm all for it. But the reason why it is for me what it is, and the reason why I say Sherry over Paul Heyman is because she could take a bump more often than Paul did.
Yeah.
More often than Paul Bearer did too. So it kind of just goes that as far as if you're talking about the total package of what you're looking at as a manager, you got Bobby Heenan, who's the total package. You have Cornette, who comes in a strong second. If it wasn't for Bobby Heenan being as good as he was, you can easily talk about it. You probably would have some people who would argue that Cornette is better than Bobby Heenan, and they could technically be wrong. But then again, their argument would definitely be heard. 3, I got Miss Sherry. So Sherry is always just kind of where it belongs in this regard. And then, of course, like I say, Paul Heyman. Of course, I don't think that Paul Heyman is getting slighted in any way, but I also don't think he's not necessarily a bad pick. I mean, it just kind of fell where it fell if you look at it.
Yeah, but the bump and talk, I think the bump and we emphasize, George, and I think you did this with this list. And this is like, me, These are the 3 people at the top of this list are 3 of my favorite wrestlers. I'll call them wrestlers, managers, wrestlers, whatever, ever. Like Sherry Martel was, I believe she's the greatest women's wrestler of all time. Because of the things she did, again, her ability to bump, if she was there today, it'd be like if she was bumping for Nia Jax, the Beals she'd take, her ability to get heat. Like I watch her as a women's wrestler. It was like 5 minutes, like saying the referee's going to sexually harass me or something like that. Just hilarious stuff. She managed great people. Like Paul is a promo. I mean, the two top guys probably. Like Paul's a promo is good, but he didn't take the bumps. I agree with that. Paul Bearer obviously didn't take the bumps, but I do think his impact with the Undertaker and Kane and that attitude, like he started with the Undertaker early, but helped with the Attitude Era.
Absolutely.
But I agree with Paul. I mean, we're gonna get nailed on it because everybody yes, he's great, but like when I think of a manager, I think of people that can bump, and I don't think Paul couldn't bump like these people. Paul might be as great a performer. Like he's not even a manager anymore. He's like a performer. Like it's like it's a little bit different role he plays now, which he's good at it. He's great. But I agree with your list, George. I'm 1,000% on.
I just think that this kind of list kind of shows exactly where we're looking for as a manager, and it kind of just keeps going into the it kind of just keeps playing back into what we always say we want. We kind of say we want somebody who takes a bump, a little bit of comic relief, the art of storytelling, the art of being able to kind of not necessarily force a specific sway of the crowd, but you have a way with the crowd that actually works in your character's favor. And so I think we had all that with the managers we had. We ranked them based off of that information and just kind of said, hey, these are the best. These are the top 5. I mean, in history. So, of course, what I want everybody to do is because everybody's going to do it. They're not going to necessarily agree with this, and I get it. I get it. That's the point of the list. You were supposed to bring your top 5 to the table and give me the rebuttal, baby. Because at the end of the day, I know for a fact that there's a lot of other managers that you guys consider a lot better than some of the managers that we listed. Whatever reason that you may have, maybe it be a little bit biased to the time, maybe it'll be a little bit biased to the person themselves or who they actually worked with. But at the same time, I know for a fact that you guys can come up with a list. You guys can come up with and put some information together and say, all right, this is exactly what we see. But like I say, if you don't like it, make your own.
Yeah, we're definitely going to this was a great show. Great show. We have to figure out next week's episode. We got a few on the list, so
yeah, we're not gonna have I don't know if we'll have another color commentator like Ben on at the moment, but at the same time, Ben was a great guy. I hope y'all love Ben because it was my first time meeting Ben, and there was a lot of cocaine references when you first meet somebody. That's how you know you met somebody that's at least okay, or they do cocaine. So at the same time, I mean, I don't know which one. I mean, maybe the second impression would be better than the first, but at the same time, Ben might be on cocaine. No, that's what you, Ben. Love you, guy. Appreciate you for coming by. Appreciate you for being a good sport about being on this list, giving your curtain jerking story, giving us everything that you gave us as far as the energy. Yeah. I love the fact that you came in with like a house of fire and accepted the challenge of being on the top 5. Who is next to kind of make the challenge to be on the top 5? No, Kareem, this is not the cocaine episode, but if there was a cocaine episode, we can label this the cocaine episode if you want to. I don't think that's just in the cards like that, but that's hilarious.
We have lots of people that I think we can have on, and I think we're gonna have more. But we'll figure out it's a big week for me. It's Wrestling Night in Collingwood is next Saturday. It's our big show here locally where we raise a ton of money for the Special Olympics. So. Yeah, so I may even have to get in and ring announce. Like it may end up that I'm ring announcing. I've done it for a while, but it's usually just hard because I'm doing so many other things. But I've had to do it. But
you can get your.
It's gonna be a good. No, I get whatever. Fits. I find something that fits.
Oh, get your hair and get your Henry Winkler and get your Winkler suit.
Pick you for what? What are you picking me for? Oh, Brandon wants to be on the show eventually. So we will have Brandon on the show at some point.
I'm saying, look,
we have to find a good category for Brandon. But I know there's a couple people that I'm going to try and get on here eventually. No, let's think of a good. Let's think of a good take the week and think of a good episode for next Sunday because I'm going to be fired up to watch to do the podcast next week. So,
Well, I already know what we can talk about because they just ended it. And of course, we can kind of bring up the top 5 King of the Ring winners.
yeah, right.
Of course, I'm not going to repeat Stone Cold. I think you have to omit him because, of course, y'all was just trying to shoot him to the number 1 spot, and I ain't got time for that. So, worst gimmick. I'm gonna tell you right now.
Yeah,
Shockmaster. You ain't got to go. You ain't got to go into 5. Shockmaster was horrible. you ain't got to do a list of that shit. Shockmaster.
Well, listen, you get you through the worst gimmicks in the Dungeon of Doom, and I mean, I think you can make a top 5 list of that.
Sullivan, Mr. Sullivan, goddamn
the Shark, Zodiac.
Okay, the Shark was insane. It was more funny than what it was actually supposed to be, I think.
What if we did worst WCW gimmicks?
We'd be doing the top 30 at that point.
I know, but we gotta find top 5 because I don't think you do worst gimmicks of all time because that's a pretty big list. But like
WCW gimmicks, I can definitely do. I mean,
yeah,
I know
there's a lot.
Probably like. Y'all had a motherfucking Minotaur on the TV. Like,
oh, the Yeti? Remember when he sodomized Hulk Hogan?
Like, bro, what are you doing? Like, on stage in real time.
the Gobbledygooker.
Yeah. Gobbledygooker, yes. That dude there.
Yeah, he probably wouldn't make. He's not going to be on the. He'll be on the WWF list, but not the WCW list. The WCW, like you could do WWF list in decades. Like, I mean. There were some bad gimmicks in the WWF in like 2005, 6, 7, when they were doing some stupid gimmicks too. Like there's a generation of bad gimmicks. So, but WCW's got some doozies. Like Glacier.
Kazarian.
Yeah. He wasn't a gimmick.
Bad gimmick. Yeah, I wouldn't say that was a bad gimmick.
That was TNA. That's Frankie Kazarian.
Yeah, TNA. I was like, what?
That's his name.
No. Somebody said this in a post, and I'm like, what are you talking about? And like I like to. So one of the things is while we do the show is I like to kind of look up some of the information that we're actually talking about at the moment. I like to kind of bring a little bit of light to it as well. Beaver cleavage. That
was bad.
Mantar.
Mantar's bad.
You know who's my favorite as far as the worst gimmick ever? Kerwin White. Kerwin White. That's my number 1. I'll get. But, you know what? Let's do an episode of the worst gimmicks of WCW or WWE because
maybe let's start with WCW. Let's get them out of the way because they got some bad ones. Like
yes, they do. Oh man.
So. Well, I think that'll be next. See, that's the thing. Yeah, Mike Awesome is a good one. But Mike Awesome was no pun intended, all pun intended, actually, awesome wrestler. But hey, yeah, his gimmicks in WCW was his shits. So there's so many. And, but I think that's a good episode next week. This was a fantastic episode. Thanks again, Ben. And thanks to everyone for tuning in. Like, subscribe, share, all that good thing.
Y'all have a good Memorial Day weekend. I hope everything goes well. If y'all are off and y'all are barbecuing, send your boy addresses so I can come get a plate. I will.
All right. Everyone have a good night.
Peace.